My name is Elena Marlowe. I'm 28 years old, and I've always been called the emotional one in the family. My friends say I'm bold to a fault, my coworkers whisper that I have a stubborn streak, and my parents, well, they've often rolled their eyes at me, like my feelings were a performance they didn't buy tickets for. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day they decided to erase me from their legacy. I still remember the evening when it all began, like a scar burned into memory. My parents had gathered us, me, my older brother Samuel, and my younger sister Claire, in the living room of our childhood home. The same home where I'd practiced piano until my fingers bled, where I'd hidden under the staircase during thunderstorms, where I'd carried secrets I thought only walls could hold. The air was unusually tense, though my mother, always theatrical, had laid out trays of hors d'oeuvres as if it were some celebration. My father stood tall, his chin lifted in that way that always reminded me of a general addressing his troops. He said, "We have something important to share." My stomach twisted. Important. With my parents, that word always meant trouble. Samuel smirked knowingly, as if he'd already peeked at the script. Claire twirled a strand of her golden hair around her finger, her expression innocent, expectant. And then it came. After much thought, my father announced, "We've decided that our estate, our inheritance, will be divided between Samuel and Claire." That was it. A blunt knife to the chest. I laughed. A sharp, incredulous laugh that bounced off the walls. "Excuse me? Divided between Samuel and Claire? What about me?" My mother's lips pressed into a thin, guilty smile. "Darling, you know you've always been independent. You have your career. You'll be fine." Fine. That word exploded in my ears. Fine meant disposable. Fine meant forgotten. Fine meant unloved. My brother's grin widened, and my sister looked at me with the pity of someone who'd just been handed the crown jewels while watching her sibling sink in mud. I felt heat rush to my face. "You're cutting me out. After everything I've done for this family, you're giving my inheritance, my future to them?" "Not everything has to be about you, Elena," my father snapped. "Samuel has responsibilities. Claire needs stability. You, on the other hand, have always managed to land on your feet." It was surreal. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the tray of hors d'oeuvres across the room. Instead, I stood frozen, watching my life slip from my hands like sand through a sieve. That night, lying awake in the room that used to be mine, I made a vow. If they wanted to erase me, I'd carve my name deeper than ever before. If they wanted silence, I'd make noise they couldn't ignore. And if they thought I'd walk away empty-handed, they'd soon learn that I was far more dangerous than the emotional one they mocked. I began to plan. At first, my plan was nothing but a swirl of rage and desperation. But as days passed, clarity came. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, justice, in the countless sacrifices I'd made that no one ever acknowledged. The nights I stayed up helping Claire with her essays, the times I bailed out Samuel from reckless choices, the years I devoted to making my parents proud, only to be dismissed as if I'd been nothing more than background noise in their perfect family portrait. They had given away my inheritance, but I was about to take something far greater, the truth. And when the truth came out, none of them would ever look at me or each other the same way again. I started small, listening, watching, collecting the tiny cracks in our family's perfect facade. You'd be surprised how many secrets hide in plain sight when you stop playing the obedient daughter and start paying attention. Samuel's late-night phone calls that ended abruptly when anyone walked in, Claire's sudden disappearances with flimsy excuses, my father's private meetings at odd hours, my mother's trembling hands when she thought no one was watching. They thought they could cast me out, but they'd underestimated me, because if they wanted a war, I was ready to fight. And so, the first piece of my revenge began to take shape, a plan that would force every single one of them to face the truth they so desperately wanted to bury. The first piece of my revenge belonged to Samuel, and it was the kind of secret that could topple everything. I didn't have to dig too deep to find Samuel's secret. That's the funny thing about people who think they're untouchable. They stop hiding in plain sight. It started with a single phone call I overheard in the hallway. His voice was low, urgent, coated in the kind of fear I'd never associated with him before. "No, you don't understand. I'll get the money. Just give me more time." I froze. My brother, the family's golden boy, the one my father called responsible, begging for more time. I leaned against the wall, holding my breath, praying the floorboards wouldn't creak beneath me. "I said I'll handle it," Samuel snapped before hanging up. I slipped back into my room, my heart racing. So Mr. Responsible had a debt, a big one if his voice was any indication. For days I watched him. He left the house late, returned later, his tie crooked, his hands shaking. He avoided my gaze at breakfast. Claire, too absorbed in her social media bubble, didn't notice. My parents chalked it up to stress at work. But I knew. One night, I followed him. Yes, I know how it sounds like some cheap detective novel, but I was desperate for leverage. He drove across town to a dimly lit bar, the kind of place where the neon sign flickers and the parking lot smells of spilled beer. I waited outside in my car, my pulse thrumming. He disappeared inside, and through the dusty window, I saw him meet with two men. Broad shoulders, leather jackets, the kind of men who didn't shake hands. They sized each other up like predators circling prey. When Samuel slid an envelope across the table, I knew I'd struck gold. Debt, gambling, something dirty. My perfect brother wasn't so perfect after all. The next morning, I confronted him. Not directly, that would have been reckless. Instead, I left a note on his desk. "I know." That was it. 2 words, enough to make him sweat. And oh, he did. For the next week, he avoided me like the plague. His smug grin evaporated, he barely touched his breakfast, he jumped whenever his phone buzzed. Watching him unravel was intoxicating, like sipping the sweetest revenge. But I wasn't ready to cash in just yet. Samuel's secret was my ace, and I planned to play it at the perfect moment. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to Claire. Sweet, golden-haired Claire, the baby of the family. She'd always been coddled, pampered, handed everything without lifting a finger. She had the kind of luck that made me grit my teeth. Jobs landed in her lap, friends adored her, and now she'd been handed my inheritance. But beneath her angelic smile, there was something. I could feel it. And if Samuel had skeletons in his closet, then Claire, well, she had a whole cemetery. It started with her sudden absences. She'd leave in the middle of the day with vague excuses like meeting a friend, running errands, yoga class. But she'd return hours later, her hair tousled, her perfume sharp, her eyes too bright. Curiosity gnawed at me until I decided to follow her, just as I had Samuel. She didn't go to yoga. She didn't even go to meet friends. She went to a sleek hotel downtown, the kind with polished marble floors and staff who pretended not to notice anything. And there, waiting in the lobby, was a man. Not just any man. A married man. I knew him. Everyone knew him. He was our father's colleague, a man whose family dined with ours on countless occasions. And there he was, brushing Claire's cheek with his hand before leading her upstairs. I nearly laughed out loud. My perfect little sister, tangled in an affair that could destroy not just her reputation, but our father's too. I left the hotel before they reappeared, my heart hammering with equal parts triumph and disgust. By the time I got home, I was buzzing. 2 siblings, 2 secrets, 2 weapons. But here's the thing about revenge. It's never neat. It's messy, unpredictable, a living beast that grows the more you feed it. And as much as I tried to plan every step, the truth had a way of spilling out faster than I expected. Because Samuel noticed I was watching him, and Claire caught my reflection in the hotel mirror as she kissed her lover goodbye. The game had begun, whether I was ready or not. At dinner one evening, my father raised his glass, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath his roof. "To family," he declared. I almost choked on my wine. Family? The word was poison in my mouth. Samuel avoided my eyes, his fork clinking nervously against his plate. Claire, on the other hand, stared at me, not with sisterly warmth, but with cold suspicion, her lips curling into the faintest smirk. She knew I knew. And for the first time, I wondered who would strike first. Secrets are like cracks in glass. At first, they're barely visible, a thin line spidering across the surface. But the more pressure you apply, the faster they spread, until one day the whole thing shatters. By the time Claire's eyes met mine across the dinner table, her smirk daring me to say something, I knew the glass was already splintering. She waited until our parents left the room, Mom to fetch dessert, Dad to take a phone call. Then she leaned closer, her voice soft, almost playful. "You saw, didn't you?" she whispered. I didn't flinch. Saw what? Her lips curved into a sly smile. "Don't play dumb, Elena. You followed me. You saw us." I met her gaze with the kind of calm I didn't feel. If you're talking about sneaking into hotels with a married man, then yes, I saw. Her eyes flashed. For a moment, I thought she'd slap me across the table. Instead, she laughed. A quiet, bitter laugh that made my skin crawl. "You think you're clever, don't you? Always snooping, always judging. But here's the thing, Elena. You have no proof. It's your word against mine." She was right, but proof could be gathered. Screenshots, photos, times, dates. And if I knew one thing, it was that I could wait. Before I could respond, our mother returned, balancing a tray of desserts. Claire sat back, her face transforming into angelic sweetness. I almost gagged. That night, lying in bed, I realized something important. I didn't just have secrets. I had ammunition. Samuel's debt, Claire's affair. All I needed was the right trigger. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. Sometimes it pulls the trigger for you. 2 days later, Samuel came to me. His usual arrogance was gone. He looked pale, drawn, desperate. "Elena," he said, his voice shaking, "we need to talk." I raised an eyebrow. "About what?" He glanced around like a hunted animal. "I know you've been watching me, following me. Please, you don't understand. Those men, if they don't get their money, I'm finished." I folded my arms, savoring the moment. "So the golden boy has a problem. How much do you owe?" His jaw tightened. "More than you can imagine. More than I can ever pay." For a second, pity flickered in me. He looked so broken, so unlike the smug brother I'd grown up with. But then I remembered his smirk when my parents cut me out of the inheritance, that smug grin as if he'd won some invisible contest, and the pity turned to ash. "Not my problem," I said coldly. "You wanted everything, Samuel. Now you can enjoy the consequences." He grabbed my arm, his grip almost painful. "If you tell them, if Mom and Dad find out, it will destroy me. Please, Elena, I'm begging you." I stared at his hand until he released me. "Begging suits you," I whispered. He left his shoulders hunched, and I felt a rush of power. For the first time in years, I was not the powerless one. But my triumph was short-lived, because the very next evening, Claire cornered me in the kitchen. She shut the door, her face hard. "I know you're planning something," she hissed. I leaned against the counter, feigning boredom. "Oh, enlighten me. You think you can use my personal life against me, but you forget I have eyes too." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Do you really want me to tell Mom and Dad about your little obsession with snooping? about how you're trying to ruin the family?" Her words cut deep, not because they were true, but because they carried a threat I couldn't ignore. "You wouldn't dare," I said. She smiled. "Try me." It was a standoff, and I realized, with a chill, that my siblings weren't as blind as I'd thought they were. They were playing the game too. The tension grew unbearable. Meals were silent wars, glances sharp as knives. Our parents, blissfully ignorant, praised Samuel's hard work and Claire's maturity, while I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Then, one night, everything exploded. We were gathered in the living room, the four of us, when Samuel's phone rang. He answered, his face draining of color. "I told you, I just need more time," he shouted, his voice cracking. The room went dead silent. My parents stared at him in shock. Claire's eyes widened. And me? I smiled, because the crack in the glass had finally spread too far. "What's going on?" my father demanded. Samuel stammered, tried to cover, but it was too late. I stepped in, my voice calm, steady. "Why don't you tell them, Samuel? Tell them about the debts, the men you meet at shady bars, the envelopes of cash." My mother gasped. My father's face turned crimson. Claire looked from me to Samuel like she was watching a house burn. "You liar!" Samuel shouted, his voice shaking with rage. "Yes," I said simply, "and I know everything." The room erupted. My father roared, my mother sobbed, Samuel cursed me. But through the chaos, Claire sat still, her face pale, because she knew her turn was coming next, and I was ready to pull her into the fire. The night Samuel's secret burst into the open was like watching a storm crash through our house. My father shouted until his voice cracked, my mother wept into her hands, and Samuel stood there trembling, torn between rage and shame. But Claire? Claire sat frozen, her hands clasped in her lap, her lips pressed into a thin line. I caught her eye, and for the briefest moment, her mask slipped. Fear. Real fear. That was when I knew I had her. My father paced the room like a caged animal. "How could you, Samuel? Gambling? Debts? Meeting with criminals? Do you have any idea what this could do to our family's reputation?" Samuel's face twisted. "What family, Dad? The family that cuts one of us out like trash? The family that only pretends to care as long as we play perfect?" The words hit like a blow. My father flinched, my mother sobbed harder, and I almost laughed. For once, Samuel had spoken the truth. But I wasn't ready to let him steal the spotlight, not when Claire's skeletons were rattling in her closet. "Maybe Samuel isn't the only one with secrets," I said quietly, my voice slicing through the chaos. The room stilled. My father turned, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" Claire shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. Her head shook ever so slightly, a warning. I ignored it. "Let's just say that Samuel's gambling might not be the only thing destroying this family's reputation." My mother's eyes darted between us. "Alina, please, don't. Not more." But I wasn't about to stop, not when justice was so close I could taste it. Claire rose slowly, her smile brittle. "You're lying," she said. "That's all you do, Elena. Stir up trouble, twist things, make yourself the victim. Isn't that right? Is it a lie? Is sneaking around hotels with married men just my imagination?" The silence that followed was suffocating. My father's face drained of color. My mother let out a strangled sound, half gasp, half sob. Claire's eyes blazed. "You followed me?" "Yes, and I saw everything." Her composure shattered. She lunged forward, her voice trembling with fury. "How dare you? You invade my privacy, you stalk me, and then you twist it into some disgusting accusation?" Accusation or confession? For a moment, the room dissolved into chaos again, my father demanding answers, my mother pleading for calm, and Samuel throwing me a look of bitter satisfaction, as if to say, "Now it's her turn."
But Claire wasn't Samuel. She didn't crumble. She fought. "You're pathetic," she spat at me when the noise died down. "You can't stand that no one chose you. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Mom and Dad gave the inheritance to me and Samuel, and you can't let it go. So you dig around in our lives hoping to find dirt. You're jealous. Always have been." Her words struck a nerve, but I refused to let it show. "Jealousy doesn't make married men sneak around hotels with you. That's on you, Claire." She trembled, but she didn't break. Not yet. That night, after the storm of arguments and slammed doors, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom. The walls felt closer, suffocating. I could still hear my parents' muffled voices arguing down the hall. My father was furious, my mother torn apart. Samuel was ruined, Claire was exposed, and me? I should have felt victorious, but instead a strange hollowness gnawed at me. Because deep down, I knew I hadn't won. Not yet. Exposing their secrets was just the beginning. Revenge wasn't about one night of chaos. It was about making sure they could never dismiss me again, that they could never look at me as fine, as expendable, as forgotten. The next morning, my mother knocked on my door. Her eyes were red, her face pale. She looked older than I had ever seen her. "Elena, why are you doing this? You're tearing us apart." I met her gaze, unflinching. "I didn't tear us apart. You did, when you gave away my inheritance." She flinched, like I'd struck her. We thought you'd be okay. You've always been strong." That word again. Strong, fine, independent. Translation, not worth protecting. I'm not okay, and I won't be until you understand what you've done. She left without another word, but I knew then my parents would never admit their mistake willingly. If I wanted justice, I'd have to force it. And so I sharpened my weapons. I gathered proof. Photos of Claire with her lover, records of Samuel's debts, whispers I'd overheard from my father's late-night meetings. Yes, even he had secrets, though I hadn't yet unraveled them fully. Piece by piece, I built my case. Not just against my siblings, but against the very image of our perfect family. Because if they wanted to erase me from their legacy, I would burn the legacy down to ashes. But even the best-laid plans have cracks. One evening, as I tucked my evidence into a folder hidden beneath my bed, I caught movement in the mirror, a shadow in the doorway. It was Claire. She stood there, arms crossed, her smile cold. "You think you're clever, but you're not the only one collecting evidence." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" She stepped into the room, pulling her phone from her pocket. She tapped the screen, and suddenly I heard my own voice, recorded, raw, dripping with venom. "I won't be okay until they understand what they've done. I'll burn the legacy down to ashes." She'd been listening, recording, and now the game had shifted.
I'd always imagined myself as the hunter, circling my prey with precision, waiting for the moment to strike. But as Claire stood in my doorway with my words echoing from her phone, I realized with a sickening jolt that maybe I'd been prey all along. "You recorded me?" My voice came out sharp, brittle. Claire tilted her head, her golden hair catching the dim light. "You didn't think you were the only one who could play this game, did you? I told you, Elena, you're not as clever as you think." The recording looped again. "I'll burn the legacy down to ashes." My stomach twisted. Taken out of context, it sounded unhinged, dangerous, the kind of thing our parents would seize on as proof that I was unstable, vindictive, even toxic. "What do you want?" I asked finally. Claire slipped the phone back into her pocket, her smile spreading. "Simple. You stop coming after me, and I don't share this little gem with Mom and Dad. Or better yet, maybe I show it to Dad's colleagues. Imagine how that would sound. The daughter who wants to destroy the family's reputation." I clenched my fists so tight, my nails dug crescents into my palms.
She thought she'd trapped me. She thought a single recording could undo me. But she underestimated one thing. Desperation breeds creativity. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "Keep your toy. But remember, if you go public with that, I'll go public with your hotel visits, and let's see whose scandal explodes louder." For a flicker of a moment, her smile faltered. Then she recovered, her eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't dare." I leaned closer, whispering so only she could hear. "Try me." She left, slamming the door behind her, but the echo of my own voice, those damning words, lingered in the air like smoke. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, staring at the growing pile of evidence I'd collected. Samuel's gambling, Claire's affair, my father's mysterious dealings that I hadn't yet pieced together, and now Claire's recording of me. The war wasn't one-sided anymore. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was unbearable. Samuel avoided everyone, hiding in his room. My father barked orders over the phone, his temper sharper than ever. My mother flitted around like a ghost, wringing her hands, trying to keep us from shattering completely. And Claire? She was radiant, smiling, playing the role of the sweet daughter while slipping daggers behind her back. Over breakfast, she leaned across the table, her voice sweet as honey. "You look tired, Elena. Rough night?" I forced a smile. "Not at all, just busy. You know me, always working hard." Her eyes glinted. She knew I was bluffing, and I knew she was too. The tension between us was so thick it could have strangled a room full of people. Later that day, Samuel cornered me in the hallway. He looked worse than ever, dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled. "Elena, you have to stop this. You're destroying us." I almost laughed. "Me? Samuel, you did that yourself when you gambled away your future." He shook his head. "You don't get it. Those men, they don't just disappear. If I don't find the money, they'll come after me. They'll come after all of us." His words chilled me. I thought of this as a family war confined within our walls, but Samuel had dragged wolves to our door, and now they were circling. "Then maybe," I said slowly, "you'd better confess before they knock down the front door." He glared at me, but there was no fight left in his eyes, only fear. By evening, I decided I couldn't keep waiting for the perfect moment. If Claire thought she could corner me, and if Samuel's debts threatened to spill into our lives, then I needed to take control fast. So I did what I do best. I listened. That night, as my father argued on the phone in his study, I crept close enough to catch his words. "No, I can't cover for him forever. If this deal goes south, the whole board will know. We'll all go down." My breath caught. Not just Samuel, my father too. His voice carried panic, fear, the same tremor I'd heard in Samuel's. The perfect family legacy? It wasn't just cracked. It was collapsing. I should have felt victorious. Instead, a wave of dread washed over me. Because if my father's secrets tied into Samuel's debts, then the storm about to hit us wasn't just personal. It was public. And once it broke, none of us would escape. I turned away from the study, my heart pounding. My folder of secrets felt heavier than ever. But when I reached my room, the door was ajar, and the folder was gone. I froze, scanning the room. Papers scattered, drawers half opened. Someone had been here. On the bed, a single note in neat handwriting waited. Checkmate. I knew the handwriting instantly. Claire.
The note was like ice water in my veins. Checkmate. Claire had taken my folder, the one containing everything I had painstakingly collected. Every secret, every hidden truth, every weapon I'd planned to use. Gone. I stared at the empty space where it had been, my mind racing. She wasn't just striking back, she was daring me to retaliate, forcing my hand. That night, I stayed awake, listening to the creaks and sighs of the old house. Every noise made me jump, every shadow seemed like her. The war wasn't just psychological anymore. It had become personal. The next morning, the storm broke. I found Claire in the living room.
lounging like a queen, phone in hand. She didn't even look up when I entered. "You really thought you could play me, Elena? Remember? Checkmate." I stepped forward, refusing to let fear take me. "You think taking my folder makes you powerful? You're about to learn the hard way that secrets are like wildfire. You can't contain them once they start." Her eyes narrowed. "Try me." And so I did. I revealed everything I knew. Samuel's gambling debts, Claire's affair, my father's corporate maneuvering to cover for Samuel, my mother's silent complicity in keeping the family image pristine. I spoke slowly, deliberately, letting every word land like a hammer on their fragile facades. Samuel flinched. Claire paled. My parents stared, mouths open, disbelief etched on their faces. "Why are you doing this?" my mother whispered, tears in her eyes. "Because you made me invisible," I said, my voice shaking with years of suppressed anger. "You gave my inheritance to Samuel and Claire and pretended I didn't matter. I'm not invisible, and now you all will see me." The room was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. Then Samuel laughed, a sharp, hollow laugh. "You really think you've won?" he said. "You've exposed us, sure, but at what cost? The family is ruined. And for what? Money? Pride?" I met his gaze steadily. "For truth." Claire, ever calculating, smirked faintly. "Truth is subjective, Elena. And I have proof of your obsession. The recording of you planning revenge. That could destroy you." I swallowed hard. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, but I wasn't backing down. I had already stepped too far. "Do it," I said. "Show them. Show everyone what you think of me. I'll survive. But know this. I'm not afraid of the consequences anymore. I've spent my life hiding, obeying, waiting for approval. Not anymore." Her smirk faltered, and in that instant I realized something vital. Fear isn't just a weapon, it's a mirror, and Claire's reflection was trembling. The confrontation stretched into hours, words exchanged like blows, accusations flying like knives. My parents tried to mediate, but the damage was done. They couldn't. We had all seen the truth. The carefully constructed family facade had shattered. And yet in the wreckage, something shifted. Claire lowered her gaze. Samuel slumped into a chair, defeated. My parents exchanged a long look, finally recognizing the consequences of their choices. And I felt a strange, unfamiliar calm. I had won, not by destroying my siblings, but by forcing everyone to face reality. My voice had been heard. My existence, my struggles, my anger, all acknowledged at last. Days later, the inheritance issue was revisited. My parents, chastened by the chaos, offered a fair settlement. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, recognition, and the fragile bonds of family. I accepted, but the victory felt symbolic. The real triumph was reclaiming my power, my voice, my agency. I had stood my ground, survived the onslaught, and emerged stronger. That night, alone in my room, I reflected on everything that had happened. Family isn't always safe. Family isn't always fair. Sometimes family wounds deeply, but it also teaches resilience. I learned to fight, to stand up, to speak my truth, and, most importantly, to forgive. Not them, not yet, but myself for letting my anger simmer so long. And as I looked out the window at the moonlight spilling across the garden of my childhood, I asked myself a question, one I now pose to you. If you were silenced, dismissed, and overlooked, how far would you go to be heard? Because standing up for yourself isn't just revenge, it's survival. Thank you for following my story. If you felt every heartbeat of this journey, hit subscribe and join me as I share more tales of courage, resilience, and the messy, beautiful truth of family. Remember, your voice matters, even when everyone else seems deaf to it.